Welcome to Interviews with Innocence, a podcast about spirituality, consciousness, and exploring the wisdom our children bring into this world. I believe that our very young children are our greatest teachers. After all, they're the masters of living in the present moment, bubbling in unconditional love, enjoying the messiness of life, and curious about the universe in all its dimensions. The pure essence that young children exhibit lives within all of us. My hope is that these interviews will help us discover, embrace, and connect with the sacred core of childhood that resides within each of our hearts. I am your host, Marla Hughes. Hello, today I have on the show Kellyanne Meehan, and Kelly is a spirit baby medium. And I found this, when I found out about Kelly, I just thought it was so fascinating because I thought back to when I was pregnant with my kids and praying with them for them and reading them Dr. Seuss and just feeling this beautiful energy. But it just didn't seem like moms really talk about that sort of stuff, very often. And I found Kelly, and it was like, wow, I wish I would have known you a long time ago. But she does such amazing work. So welcome, Kelly.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Kelly holds a master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis in somatic psychology. Kelly has additional training in energy-based and somatic-based modalities such as Reiki I, Cranio Sacral Therapy, deaf midwifery, infant massage instruction, parent education, and yoga. Kelly uses her sensory sensitivity, which is clairvoyance and clairsentience, which we'll talk about, and clinical psychological training to support the hearts of women and couples all around the world that are looking to connect in a deeply spiritual way and an awakened way. She connects with and communicates with the baby in spirit and after birth, hence her title of Spirit Baby Medium. Kelly is also host and creator of her own podcast. She's aired that since 2017, Spirit Baby Radio, and it has over 80 episodes. So if you find this interesting today, you'll definitely have to tune in to Kelly's podcast. So Kelly, I'm so excited to have you on the show. And let's start a little bit about your childhood.
I know, my childhood, because it is a very curious place to go to question the work that I do and how it unfolded. And it's always the thing that comes up over time. And it makes me kind of sit and reflect, because what really takes me to this space to be able to connect with thousands of babies and soon to be your current parents into this world. And when I was very young, I don't know, I feel like we've all had different traumas and issues that kind of I don't want to say identified or marked us in some way, but it gave us something to kind of work with and evolve into, because I feel like I have a way of taking really negative things and making them positive somehow. I don't know if it's a talent or a burden or what it is, but
probably a little bit of both.
I know, yeah. Just reflecting back to little younger year Kelly, growing up in the East Coast of New Jersey, with a family that I felt like never really understood me. And it makes sense now, but then I was like, I was very quiet, very inward. I actually had a lot of multiple sick issues and things. Like I always had a sickness always going on. But I also in the school system was labeled as like learning disabled. And it was a really hard journey from literally, I'm telling you, from first grade all the way to like forever. But as as an adult, I was like, I'm not disabled. I just learn a certain way. And what I realized more than anything is that there was never the creative intuitive class. Like I would have accelerated in that class. And so I compensated for other strengths. And I was interesting to be retested as an adult and look at like, wow, it's interesting the way my intellect and thought process, how it was so strong in some areas and very weak in other areas. But it was like the strength areas are like, oh, this actually makes sense, the way you learn, because I was trying to learn the way the masses wanted me to learn. And it was a huge challenge. And I thought I was just stupid forever. And I've such a heart for children now that have any type of learning issue or struggle. And I talk to different parents and their children. And I always said, I'll talk to your kid. And a lot of these children, they are very sensitive. A lot of them have levels of energy awareness, telepathy, psychic connections. And I always tell these parents that are open to it, and most of them that I know are, is to kind of to allow them to be in that space, to nurture their sensitivity. Because I feel like back in the day, it was like, oh, you're shy, that's not okay.
Right.
But it's like, what's wrong with being shy? Like there's an opening to shy. There's a message to shy. There's an opportunity. It's like when I was very shy as a kid, it was really good for me. It was very safe. Being a child that feels a lot, and then into adulthood. And I didn't really own a lot of the changing energy until I was a teenager. I almost feel like they say sometimes after puberty, bigger shifts consciously change within people. And I just started to notice the earth, the trees, they had a language. I noticed that animals had their own language. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm not crazy, but I had the opportunity. I explored it, I like looked into a lot of the new age, cults and a lot of other things. Like I met the witch people, and I see, there's the voodoo Jamaicans.
Right.
And just like kind of like, but then I was like, I just didn't feel like I fit into any of those groups. So I just kind of did the world of self-study, right? I mean, that's what we do. And then it kind of brings us to this space. But I could talk so much about childhood, but
right. Yeah, I did a series on gifted children and children with Downs and or on the spectrum, and then just other learning disabilities, and some great stories of just their intuitive ability and the things that come from these children. And because they live at such a high frequency, which it sounds like you're at a much higher vibration too than a lot of people that were surrounding you. Well, let's jump in about a spirit baby medium. So how did you get involved in this? And what I know what it means, but I want to hear you tell me what it means.
Well, because I actually invented the term spirit baby medium. It didn't exist before I came up with it. I'd say probably 5 years ago. And it just felt like, that's it. This is right. Because people were like, you're a pre-birth communicator, baby whisperer, baby intuitive. And I was like, all those things felt like they were owned.
Right.
And so, but now people are using my term a lot, which is quite fascinating. And I don't trademark it. Maybe I should. I just feel like to own something that I feel like is for everybody is really there's energy around that. And so I almost feel like it happened one day, but it didn't, because years ago, oh my gosh, I would say it was like over 10 years now, I had my first real experience with communication through a friend who was pregnant. And we were all in school as my graduate program. We're all just, having a little picnic in between school on the hill. She was very, very big, pregnant, ready to go. And we all had our hands on her, doing all this energy work, sharing with her. And I was very new to it. I realized when I would touch people, it was probably more than that I would start seeing things. And I said to her, are you sure you're having one child? I see two children. And I saw them, show themselves a certain way. And I said it was a boy and a girl, and they're going to help fix your bones. I don't know why I knew that. And then she said, no, I'm going to have one boy. That's what I feel. Okay. All right, Mom. I'm sure I want to trust that for you. And then she had a home birth months later. She didn't do any intervention. She ended up giving birth to the boy first and the girl second. And it was like shocking. Everybody was like texting me left and right.
I bet.
I remember that moment on the hill when you said that in this park. And I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I did say that, because I kind of forgot. And then I was like, what are they all thinking now, right? Because it was just so profound. And now they're like teenagers, because it was so long ago. They're like way over this, more than 10 years ago. And that I felt like was the beginning, because after that I started to notice, especially pregnant women, I would see, there's a way I see the energy kind of walking, the way energy is expressed to me is I feel like everyone has their unique way of connecting. So the way I would see it within my psychic eye space is like, I would actually see a child walking around the person, and it would do, the child would do things. They'd have a personality, a certain way they dressed and how they looked. And so I started to relay this information to pregnant moms, and the pregnant moms were like, because I'd say, oh, the baby says you need to do this and this. What do you think about that? Like whether it was like water or breast or whatever. And they were like, oh, that's so interesting you say that, because that's what the doctor said, or that's just what came up. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it kind of led from there. And then my own experience of pregnancy, I really got that experience. I was like, wow, like I even had this moment where I was like, I feel like there's two thinking heads in one body. Someone's like, what does that mean? I'm like, I know. I was like, I don't know. But I felt like his presence and his thought process within me in my own psychic space. And, pregnancy wasn't like happy running in the meadows of flowers. I found it to be very emotionally shadowy and very pushing of so much layers of, past traumas and generational stuff. But my son spoke to me a lot and came to me in dreams. He said, I'm a boy, like, deal with it. This is who I am. Not that I had anything else to deal with, but then I knew he was a boy. I felt his energy. And then I don't do a lot of interventions either. So I did one sonogram the whole pregnancy, and they said, it's a boy. And I'm like, of course it is. He's like telling me all the time he's a boy. Right. And then I had him. And then years later, I had my other one, which was, both different psychic experiences with communication. And, when we're listening, we can really receive a lot from that. But sometimes people try too hard to listen. We're not listening with our ears. We're listening with our body, with our heart, with our own psychic space. And there's a bit of a practice around that if people get discouraged or confused. But I do, as you said earlier, I do feel like it is our natural born right to have communication with our children. Indigenous cultures accept it. Why in a more developed society have we resisted this amazing mystery of the birth of life within us? Like, we even once were spirit babies, we really think
absolutely
about it.
Yeah, it's interesting how our world is really going back to the indigenous cultures. I'm also doing a series on that, and just their ways. And it also makes sense to me that you say that they have to practice, because I know a lot of mediums. You're my first spirit baby medium I've ever met, and I've been to workshops, and it's like a muscle that you need to practice to be able to connect. So how does this look? Because I just loved when you talk about this. I know the women who come to you. Well, tell us about the kind of women that contact you.
It's not just women, it's actually couples too. So there's a lot of
yes.
Sometimes it's men and women, and sometimes it's women and women. And I take everybody, transgender, wherever your sexual preference is, because people get very confused by that, because conception just doesn't come one way.
Right.
Single mothers, sometimes even single mothers. Some women wait so long and they have so much to deal with that they're like, oh, I'm ready to have a baby, but now where's my partner? Now I'm getting older.
I know a few of those. And it's beautiful. It is so many, there's no right way.
And so, so these women and couples, and, majority, lately have been more women, and they come, oh my gosh, where do they come from? They're from all around the world, to be honest. I mean, I feel like I've traveled the world in my home.
Right.
I've been to New Zealand, Australia, even Japan, Tanzania, Africa, UK, USA, Canada. And I feel like because there's such a need for this spirit baby communication, conscious conception, birth psychology, the foundation of that is still kind of a new science. And they really merge a lot with conscious conception and the bond in between, child and mother, child and person. And so there's a lot of energy around that, I feel like, and people are hungry for it. And I feel like collectively we are, even though there's so much fear and chaos, we know that, but there's almost like an emotional maturity or intelligence that's happening, that people are like showing up for it and going, okay, like being honest about it, like, and just working with it, being a part of it. And so I feel like that consciousness allows us to like receive more. And it is, like we said, it is a spiritual muscle, right? Because even in my work from 5 years ago is so different. I'm like surprised.
I bet.
Of things I pick up on or look at, and I'm just like, but I want that. I want to be of service, and I want to push into the edges of the unknown. And I don't, if I don't know something when I'm sitting with somebody, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm not going to make stuff up. I'm just going to say, I don't have that answer.
Right.
Or I'm not really sure. Why are we not receiving that? Is there some other piece and journey? And so I find that like a lot of people that come to me, they find hope and inspiration a lot to go, okay, I'm not completely crazy. And I've had women tell me that once they have the babies, like, okay, I thought I was crazy the whole time, because they felt it. They felt like, I feel the connection. I feel that the way the baby looked, and even their personality, and everyone has a different sensitivity. And some people have to work at it more. It's really working at it is the quieting the mind, like get out of the way, right?
Exactly. Get yourself out of the way. When you say conscious conception, and you mentioned, did you say Park? What kind of science did you say?
Oh, birth psychology.
Birth psychology.
Yeah.
So what, can you tell us a little bit about both of those? I mean,
So birth.
just briefly.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, birth psychology, there's an organization. I'm not going to get all the letters right now. It's like in my head, but it's like they call it APA, it stands for. But birth psychology is an amazing organization I learned about over 10 years ago in my graduate program, where a lot of the schooling I took somatic psychology as my main emphasis, but there was also prenatal psychology. And I got a little bit of that, but I actually wasn't so interested in that in the time now that I am now. But they had all the progressive, very well-known people that have really created the foundation around birth psychology teaching at that school. And it wasn't easy because these teachers were like really, I mean, it's quite phenomenal. And they really put a space in the whole, conscious conception and bonding in birth, and like even looking at the way women birth, and with low lighting in a more, in a way that's not like such a an emergency or such a fear.
Right.
And we're all so affected by that. You hear traumatic births and or undesired births all the time. And it's like, it's collective. This is not an easy thing to experience going into the hospital system, or even home birth, center birth's a little bit different, but still you're pushing against the culture of a lot of stuff.
Right.
And like you said earlier, bring it back to the original, the natural, the indigenous. It's like, it takes work, right? Mm-hmm. And so the birth psychology, I definitely, recommend people to look up, I think it's birthpsychology.com, or it could be .org. I think it's .com. But you can find a lot of great insights around that. And there's a lot of validating science, actually. They have a lot of different studies and data. And if you're their member, you can get a lot of data. And it's quite fascinating and amazing. It really affirms probably a lot of things that people thought or think.
Right.
What was your other question? You said something.
The conscious conception. And with that, I'd like for you to, sounds like it's part of the birth psychology, but
it is, yeah.
I'd like for you to talk a little bit about, okay, so everyone, all those different people come in to see you. And then how does this manifest after they are able to begin, communicating with their baby? How does it manifest during the pregnancy? And how does it manifest after? In other words, how does it help them just, how does that manifest?
It does help them. So I actually do see some people from, I call beginning, middle, and end, which is really fun. Sometimes I get people in different stages. Sometimes they're just in conception, or I lose them a little bit somewhere, or I see them all the way through, or just in pregnancy, or dealing with loss, whatever kind of birth loss they're having. But how I, when I'm connecting with somebody, there's a way that I do it. And I actually do a lot of, I call it the paper and pen method, because for me, information moves very quickly, and I actually write it down. And I actually I always, I joke, I have a little stick figure, or I have a printout of a body, because when I'm listening to information from the person, and I don't do it on, I do it through sound, through phone, because I'm listening to energy. I don't actually look at the people. Unless they come in person, which that's different. Sometimes I do see in-person people, very, very rarely. These days, I'm really pushing more towards phone work. But, and as I'm, taking my notes, I'm looking at things, and I'm writing, and I'm scribbling. And then I have a little section in there. I take people through this kind of body calming space, because I need to listen. And if people are nervous or all over the place, you see that. And I want to get the information behind their nervousness,
yes.
which is a skill, by the way. It's not easy, because it's like, oh, how am I then going behind the information of their own stuff, and what they're thinking and even feeling is a different part of it. And then I tune into baby in the beginning. There's a way that I sense and feel into baby energy. Sometimes there's 1, 2, 3, sometimes there's more. It doesn't mean they're all coming into conception. Sometimes it means different things. And so, sometimes I can feel the gender, but actually in the past year or two, they're shifting. Something is shifting in that spirit baby world, because they're not being so free with their gender. And so I'm and I had another spirit baby intuitive say that. And I'm and I saw her post it one day, and I'm oh my gosh, there's something happening,
wow.
Right? And I'm okay. And so I don't know if it's, they want to be recognized more as a soul, unless as a female or male at that point. But obviously there's going to be some option at some point. And in pregnancy is different. You can start to feel a different vibration in that. And so, seeing women, I see women that struggle so much in conception with, using IVF, IUI, intervention, unknown infertility, sometimes known fertility. And there's so much involved in that. And people are so unique. There's not one size fits all when it comes to what their story is, what their energy is, what they're dealing and healing with, and how are they then, continuing to be inspired and listen to their body in a certain way. And so then I get baby messages. I share those. Some babies are very talkative, some are not.
Right.
And what I do is I encourage the people to connect with their spirit baby without me, of course. And I ask the baby ways that they can connect. And this is really fun, because I used to ask people how they connected. Instead, I asked the baby to affirm, are they someone that journals, someone that needs music or yoga? Is it movement? Is it meditation? And it's funny because the people will laugh and go, oh my gosh, like, how did you know that's what I do with my baby? I'm like, because they're telling me that.
Wow.
And then it's really, really affirming to say, look, I am listening to spirit baby. I am paying attention, and without overthinking it, because that's what happens. Like, the number one question people ask me is, how do I know I'm not making it up?
Right.
Is it my imagination? It's like, oh, that's like the number one question. And I said, psychic awareness, dream space, imagination, and life are all a very thin line between all those.
Yes.
Because with the work that I do, I could definitely say all of this is my imagination, all of it, because I could feel how it could interlink into that space. But then I started speaking about the things that I saw and realized it wasn't my imagination.
Right, because it was true.
So so then I'm like, okay. And then it made me realize that I pick up energy all the time everywhere I go. And so when I get stories in my mind, I used to think that they were just fantasies, but they're actually true expressions in the way the energy is being shared to me.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot with mediums.
Yeah.
That in the beginning, it's kind of like, is this just in my head? But the more you realize and you're validated that you know that it's not. Do you have a couple of stories about what babies have shared, and without saying any names, of course?
No, I know. I'm trying to think in my head, like, what is a good story? What kind of story do you want? Give me an issue. And I'm sure I've worked with that person.
Well, just a story that maybe the baby told whomever something really fascinating that there's no way anybody could know that, and then it was actually true.
Oh yeah, that happens actually many times, which is always really fun, because again, I always say I'm the messenger. So what I see, I'm going to share it. That may not make sense to me. And this one woman she did have multiple miscarriage, but I remember one time I was like, I see this swan. A big swan. And I was like, okay, this baby's telling me about a swan. And I'm thinking, this was years ago, because this was when I was kind of like, am I just going to say everything I see? Is it going to make sense? Now things I get. And so I said, yeah, I see this swan. And is there any connection? And she got really quiet for like a little bit. And then she was like, oh, and then she realized that the day that she actually had the miscarriage, she saw these trumpet swans that were very rare in this lake. And that was a connection with her baby to tell her that she was there. But this woman did go on and conceive, and then this being came to earth, which was really, amazing and powerful for her. Right. That's the one. I want to share this story more with depth and outwardly there and more of a book form. But there's been other times where, in pregnancy, it's a little bit different. Like, conception and pregnancy is really similar in spirit baby, but of course in pregnancy, there's something I feel like the babies, they come in the room and they sit here, like they put their hands up on the table and they're like ready to go and like have a conversation. And I find it fun because they'll just share things, sometimes about the dad, sometimes about their father, about the father's personality, or the dad doesn't believe in this or this. And then the mothers are like laughing about it because like, oh my gosh, it's so true. And, some people will cry because I said, you think it's daddy, but it's not. And then they'll be like, oh my gosh, I did feel like that. It's like, it's not his fault, but the baby wants to know. And other times, there's so many like different little stories that come up. Sometimes people question, is my baby okay? Those are always really interesting. Like, I went to the doctor and they're freaked out. And I said, well, you sit with your intuition, take a breath, I can't say if the baby's okay or not at times. So I don't have those answers, but I was like, why does the baby keep telling me, Mom, you need to calm down. Mom, you need to calm down. What does
Right.
that mean to you? And then she gets the result and says everything was fine.
Right.
So I was like, oh, you got your first test as being a worrying mother in pregnancy.
Right. Have you
Um,
ever experienced? I had someone, I interviewed someone the other day that talked about how baby souls, that they
mhm.
don't really come in to the body, and they kind of come in and out until like a certain stage in pregnancy.
That's probably my number two question that people always ask
Really?
me. Yeah, besides the number one. Yeah, there's like a few things that people always ask, and that one comes up a lot because there's a lot, I believe in the more Indian tradition, yogic kind of back in that time. I know under Kundalini, like again, I don't know the details of it, but they said, oh, well, the soul just shoots into the body once it enters the earth. And it's fine. Everybody's going kind of what this kind of template idea is, but when I see people in pregnancy, I am almost one of my disclaimers is, so I say to them, the baby is around your body and spirit and soul. So don't be scared. It doesn't mean they're leaving. It's just how I see it. And that's just
Right.
what they do. They're not sitting inside their body all day long. And I feel like the best way for people to understand that is that the soul can split in many different times and ways. It's very hard for us to understand that because in our head, we don't get that. Like
Right.
we feel very very concrete, very like, three-dimensional. And so if we can just kind of shift down inward for a moment and just imagine a baby can literally be with the grandmother, a cousin, a husband, all at the same time, even in the womb space.
Yes.
And sometimes babies will say that, like I'm with grandma. And actually, this one time that the little baby said the grandma's name. And I don't get a lot of names, but I was like, the lady was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And so, I mean, so it depends on what people want to believe. I don't want to take people's beliefs away, whatever they feel. This is really my philosophy. But,
Right.
I see babies walking around. I don't see them as being so contained to one space, but they have a connection with their body. They're like figuring it out. They're like, understanding this world and going in between. And so that's really my kind of definition.
Right. And I know that you also are a baby medium, I guess I'll call it, after the babies are born into this earthly realm. So do you do very much of that work?
Not anymore, because the before has taken over, and
Yes.
I do feel like the higher energies, whoever they are, like they're sending more people than anything that are wanting to conceive and have a lot of stuff to work through to open space for themselves and this being to come in. But when on occasion, I'll do it for a friend or something, even
Right.
their children. But because babies are very telepathic,
Yes.
they I mean, they look at you and they just send you messages instantly. It's just nonstop. And I feel like mothers really, it's so natural. We don't have to even call it telepathy. We can just call it like a bonding synergy between, mother, child, person, and child. That's just the truth of it and not make it like some odd thing. But it's just I mean, it doesn't mean you're not going to have stuff come up like, oh, my baby's crying and I'm stressed out and I'm
Oh, of
tired.
course.
I can't hear
Yes.
them. Like, it's fine. That's like a part of it. But ultimately, deep down, and even what you said earlier, like, what is the point of conscious conception or even spirit baby communication?
I didn't mean to
You know,
say it like that.
no, no,
I
but
hope I
no, no,
didn't.
no. No, but like, no, I wanted to answer that. Like, yeah, I'm probably not saying it as eloquently as you did, but like, what is that connection through? It does. I feel like when you're consciously in conception, connecting with that spirit, and in pregnancy, you're bonding in such a way that this being is like, there's a comfort, there's a bonding and connection in the outside world that is so different, and you can see it. You can see that connection with people even when they're like when you see a mother with her kids and they're kind and maybe sometimes it's so off or the kids are so off. I guarantee a lot of the times those people didn't have much of an awareness with their pregnancy.
Hmm.
So there's something to say about that. It's like spiritual connection before life, and then in life it's just like a continuation, but now they
Yes.
have a body.
Right. Well, it seems that also just to become aware and spend that quiet time, it just makes everybody in spirit and on the earthly realm just better. just more
Yeah.
loving, just better,
Yeah.
more conscious of how they live and what they do to to your body while being pregnant, and it just gives you an awareness that you wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. This is really fascinating. And you talk about creating a conscious generation, which I agree with you. I think there's a transformation of people going back to, as I mentioned, indigenous ways. And I do feel that there's a consciousness transformation happening in the world, people becoming less religious, more spiritual, if you will. So what do you mean when you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. People are awakening to their spirituality, less with doctrination. There's something that's breaking away, but people feel, a lot of fear or shame or guilt,
Right,
or
definitely.
they're trying to mix up, everything, like the religions, mixing them all together. Like a Muslim's going to marry, a Buddhist.
Right, right.
Because it's like, yeah, it's love is love. It's not, and connection is connection. And so I do feel like we are, as we were talking about earlier, just consciously we're changing. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's big and sometimes it's subtle. And so people are really kind of stepping up to consciously conceive in a way that that is just in alignment. And I know some people will question that, going, well, what about people that don't want to conceive and that being comes? And I'm like, there's a message in that, and there's a purpose in that. There's even a conscious awareness and a shift that does want to happen. And I do feel like, this is like a really tricky energy. Even as I talk about it now, I feel like there's so much happening even now with the media. And then, literally woke up this morning and I looked at my husband and I said, I try to like wake up and try to find like, where's my heart space? Where's my breath? And I woke up
Right.
and I looked at it and I go, something really big is happening. And I know there's a lot of stuff happening. I don't watch the news a lot, but there's something else that's being like expanded into. And I said, I'm not really scared of it. I don't feel the fear, but I feel like it's something bigger. And sometimes it's hard to know the details of that, but we can shift in and out and feel, I think some of us, to like really the global universal energy of like where, and it's such a felt sense psychic energy. It's like, it's almost hard to find the words. And I'm sure you've had that experience, or, others that, every time, I feel like we're moving into this next kind of shifting of just where we are, that it does affect the babies that come into this world.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, even just driving after I had acupuncture before, and you're always happy and like shiny and good.
Right.
And I had this realization. It was really, I just love that I was able to kind of reflect on this as I'm driving, and I live by all these beautiful oak trees, and it's just, the sun is bright. I thought, wow, it was like, if people didn't hold the space for babies growing within us and being a part of this world of such love, where would people be? Where
Right.
would people be? Like, it literally gives us like so much strength, possibility, inspiration when babies are born. It's like, it's like God is born, or the goddess is born, or it's like people are affected, and they can't like think about it too much. It's like even other people that aren't even related. It's like,
It's so true. That's so profound. It's just, as Wayne Dyer says, I've said this a few times on the show, but they still have droplets of heaven clinging to them, and you just look at them, and there's just an energy that, I think you're right. I think a lot of people don't even want to give it a lot of thought because it's so ineffable. You're right. You don't even know how to explain that connection. I get goosebumps just saying that, just that energy, especially if you're, and, I'm pretty sensitive too. You have that higher sensitivity. Wow. Well, I love that when you talk about that moms, when you meet them, and you just discuss like, what is this place, life before life, about? Just to, I think probably raise their curiosity, and do souls come from heaven or go to heaven, or both? And is the before life the proper word, or maybe it's called something else or has no name? And then maybe you believe your baby comes from the stars or the universal energies above, or a wave of Christ consciousness, all these different things, but they're so reflective and deeply curious questions for people to ask. And I think it's so important to even get that message out.
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on the person. I mean, for
Yeah.
sure, there are some people, because this is the great thing when I'm in a session with someone, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, I really get to see where their spiritual talents are, is what I call
Hmm.
it. Like, I could tell if they're more psychic, or if they're more mediumistic, or if they're more of a feeler, or more of like, or if they've kind of, I could see that in almost all people. Like, and I could tell a lot of people really shut things down, and that's fine. That's their own choice.
Right.
But when I see people that are like very accepting, welcoming, opening of it, they're very easy to work with. And I can see them with these questions. They can take these questions in and not feel like, oh, these are weird questions or I don't get it. It's like, yes, I'm taking that. What is this life before life? Where is this being come from? Is it the star? And being curious, being open, letting it rise. I feel like when we let that information rise around us, we change our frequency. We allow
Absolutely.
possibility of something, because otherwise we stay right in the same place.
And it's
But if we have
not
to stay in the same place, it gets boring.
right. It's very boring. And those sorts of questions, they just aren't about pregnancy, and they're about life. And if only, well, I think maybe that's why there is a consciousness shift, because more people are just in general asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
So, well, great. Well, listen, we need to wrap it up here soon. But I'd like for you to talk a little bit about spirit baby meditation.
Spirit baby meditation, like, can be done in different ways. I have so many different offerings like that for people, but I feel like a really nice place to begin. Let's say you're new, whether you're in conception, whether you're in pregnancy, or even just feeling of any kind of birth loss, is to begin with more visualization based practice. Because using that visualization space and being able to pull in and sit and be with the baby's energy, the child's energy, and kind of seeing that inner story that kind of unfolds before you and gives you insight, gives you more of an understanding of it. And so there's so many kinds of ways to meditate, and it's really different for everybody. Sometimes some people are really strong empaths, and we take them into the me and the baby take them into the feeling of the heart. I'm like, why am I saying we? It's collaborative.
Yes,
Into
yes.
the heart space, so that they can settle in and really trust. This is the biggest piece. It's like trusting. Can you
Mm,
begin to trust your intuition? When I in some of my deeper program work, one of the things is intuition. It's like, can you do trust all the time? I want you, when you walk out to the supermarket, driving your car, to see, do you trust your choices? Do you trust your decision? Are you trusting? Because once you get a foundation of trust, then you can move it into conception and then see how it fits in. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to trust this part and not the other part. And that doesn't mean that you won't have distrusting moments. We all do. That's
yeah,
part of it. But can you primarily begin to weave an energy of trust into the cells, to the breath of you, to really let it rise and be an embodiment of it? I mean, again, that takes awareness,
right.
and I'd love to go there with all, these people that I support. I feel like it helps keep me creative.
Right. So really trusting, deeply trusting your own inner guidance, your inner strength.
Yeah, and a lot I tell people, I mean, it's about them and their baby connection. The babies aren't going to tell me everything as much as they're going to tell you. But are
Mhm.
you listening? Are you using the energy of listening? Do you trust that listening? And can you receive it as a nice, warm insight instead of going, okay, give me another one. No, I need that. I don't trust that one. I'm like, that's not intuition,
That's not
right?
what
We
I
all do.
wanted.
Yeah, I don't want that. Give me something else. I'm like, that's you just kind of going on. And I've challenged some people where some women are extremely intellectual, right?
Right.
And I'm like, you got to get out of your head, get into your body. I think that's where the somatic work really comes in nicely, is like, you're not just a brain with thoughts. Like, where's your body? Where's your spirit? It has to be collaborative. And some people are like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just going to stay in the intellect world, which is probably why I attract a lot of lawyers and doctors.
Right, right. What do you mean about feelings?
Yeah, it has a good, valuable place, but do you have to be tapped into that great wisdom of intelligence when you're supporting people in that lawyer environment, that doctor environment? Where is this other inner mystic that's really all of you? And can
Wow.
you unhinge and sit into that space and let that be a part of your life
Uh,
and reality.
you're doing I'm very familiar with the doctor and lawyer world, and
Yeah.
you're right. And for them, not for them, but I mean, everyone is intellectual in their own way, but to open up that mystery and that intuitive and that unconditional trusting side is so important. And I hope this world is starting to start delving into that a little bit more. Hence, our children are very young, also are learning those ways of living that are so important.
And I get to see that with my own children, because I'm like,
Yeah.
I think we're all scared we're going to mess up our kids.
Right. Well, we all do the best we can, right? Yeah.
But I look at like my kids' own sensitivities, and I see how I have two boys, so they're so different. And one is super young, so he's still very magical. And where my other one is he has this level of, awareness and magic, but it's like he's becoming more part of the world.
Right.
And I talk about when his grandma comes around, we call her nannies. I talk about her because she'll just shift around just at different times around me. And I talk about her, and he's just he's a good listener. My older son, he just listens, and he goes, "She's here now?" And I go, "It's okay if you can't hear her, but she's still here. And sometimes you may or may not hear her. And just, there's a different way of listening to her."
Right. So I'm assuming she's passed.
Yeah, she's passed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, I want him to know the normalcy of that reality.
Right. Yes, the normalcy of that.
Yeah.
Well, you are doing him a huge, favor is not the word, just an honor to be able to share that with him, In such a.
I think we go into like, I think I was that child that never was understood in that way. And I noticed a lot of similarities in his learning and stuff. And so I'm going, he's a lot like me.
Yeah.
But I don't push any psychic development or anything upon him until he's ready for it. I'm gonna step back and see, because he did tell me I think a year ago, he said, "You know what, Mom? Sometimes when I'm sitting here, I see things." And he was being really detailed about it. And then in my head, I was like, oh, this could be a good time for his inner psychic training to begin. That he's starting to notice that he sees images, he said, but his eyes are open. And I was like, yeah. And so what I do is I let him talk about it.
Yes.
And I'm curious to see how my little one will respond to that, because he's such a different intellect. He's such a different being. He's a completely different soul awareness about him. And I'm sure they're going to teach me so much about that.
Yeah, they are our greatest teachers.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we need to wrap it up. Is there anything you would like to say? Any words of wisdom before we wrap it up? Anything I haven't asked?
Well, I mean, if you're on a conception journey, be inspired, stay motivated. Don't feel like somebody says no, or the doctor says this. Like, really sit with yourself, really create a more holistic wholeness of your conscious body awareness, and then connect with your own spirit. And also, of course, baby energies, any baby energies, really begin to dive deep into even the imagery of it, or what would that be like. And then, of course, if you're in pregnancy, yes, spirit baby communication, even more loving and pure. And then, of course, if you're healing through any kind of loss, even more powerful to bring that connection and that realization forward. So just trusting, loving, and really being with whatever comes up in the fear. And I guess that would be it. I mean, I could talk about this forever.
Yeah. And that's where people can go to your radio show, your podcast. I'm sure that you cover a lot of these topics.
Oh, yeah. Some people have emailed me and said they've conceived listening to my podcast, which is amazing. I'm like, yes. Okay.
Wow.
I have a lot of guests, a lot of different, I mean, there's so many, from dreams to twins to, there's so many different things.
Oh, gosh. That's, wow. So if people want to find you, what are your social media, or how could they find you?
Oh, yeah. My website is kind of I have out them all pointing at. Let me see. What's the best website to give you? It was soulbabycommunication.com, but also spiritbabymedium.com also will take you now to me.
Right. And these will all be in the show notes too.
Okay. And then at Spirit Baby Medium is my Instagram.
Okay.
And then I do have multiple Facebook groups and pages. I have one specifically it's called The Afterlife of Spirit Baby, for those specifically with loss. And I do have a Spirit Baby communication group as well. And I feel like in Facebook, I don't know what the name is on Facebook. Kelly Meehan.
Yeah, although I'm sure.
I don't know. Yeah, people
Yes.
will find me there. I feel like anyone that finds the information that I share is meant.
Right. And I'd like to end with, you've talked about, we didn't talk about it today, but we're talking about it now. So journaling and how to use your journal. And you say, begin with writing a letter to your baby, maybe say a prayer, mantra, an intention, and ask questions, be curious, listen deeply, sense into your heart, don't judge, and keep writing. Spirit Baby says hello. I love that. Very sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was very enlightening, and it just makes so much sense. And thank you for doing such incredible work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really wonderful to be able to share into this space. And I've listened to I actually listened to your other podcast. I don't listen to anybody's podcast, but I really appreciate it. I still have one saved. I feel like I got to go listen to that, but I'm really enjoying it. And thank you so much for having me and sharing this to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you have a great day, and give those two little boys a big hug.
I will.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you want to learn more about the show, you can find us at interviewswithinnocence.com and on Facebook or Instagram at Interviews with Innocence. Please write me a message, tell me what you liked, and let me know what else you would like to hear. I would love to hear from you. And if you liked what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating and review. It helps other listeners find the show. Thank you.